Admiral Hyan Wu stood in the command center of the Coalition headquarters. The large screens around him showed red warning lights from across human space. Colony after colony had gone silent in the past 3 months. Each red dot meant millions of people who no longer answered their communication calls. "Show me the pattern again," Hyan Wu said to Commander So Young. She was his best intelligence officer, smart and careful with details. So Young touched her control panel. The star map changed to show the timeline of lost colonies. "It started here, Admiral, at the edge of our territory. Colony Epsilon 7 went dark first. Then Epsilon 6, then Epsilon 5. They are taking the colonies one by one, moving toward our core worlds." Han Wu studied the map. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Whatever was out there was not random. It was organized and moving with purpose. Toward Earth and the other main human worlds. "What do we know about the attackers?" he asked. "Very little, sir. No survivors. No distress calls. The colonies just stopped talking to us. When our scout ships arrive, they find empty worlds. All the people are gone. All the buildings are damaged but still standing. It looks like something took everything living and left." Captain Jae-min entered the command center. His uniform was wrinkled from sleeping in his ship during the long journey back from the Outer Rim. "Admiral, I have a report from the reconnaissance mission." Hyan Wu turned to face the captain. Jae-min was young but experienced. He had led many dangerous missions and always brought his crews home safely. But today his face looked pale and worried. "What did you find, Captain?" Jae-min activated his portable display unit. Images appeared showing empty cities and silent spaceports. "We reached Colony Theta 12 6 hours after they stopped responding. The planet was still there, but—" He paused and took a deep breath. "Admiral, I have been to many battle sites. I have seen what pirates and raiders do to colonies. This was different." The images showed streets with no bodies, no signs of fighting, no damage from weapons. Everything looked normal except for one thing. There were no people anywhere. My tactical officer Yunji did a complete scan of the planet. No human life signs, no animal life signs. Even the plants were dying, but there was something else. Jae-min switched to a different image. "We found these." The screen showed strange marks in the ground. They looked like burn patterns, but they formed perfect geometric shapes. The patterns were huge, covering entire city blocks. My engineer Kite analyzed the marks. They were made by some kind of energy weapon we have never seen before. The energy signature was completely unknown to our computers. So Young leaned forward to study the images. "Captain, did you find any trace of the attackers?" "We found debris in orbit around the planet. Small pieces of what might have been ships or machines. The material was unlike anything in our databases. It seemed to be part metal, part organic tissue, like it was grown instead of built." Hyan Wu felt a cold fear growing in his chest. In his 30 years of military service, he had fought against pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species. But this was something new and unknown. "How many colonies have we lost contact with now?" he asked. "So -young .:40-7, sir, and the pattern is accelerating. In the first month, we lost 1 colony per week. Last week, we lost 5 colonies. Time to reach our core worlds at this rate," So Young quickly calculated on her computer. "If they continue on their current path and speed, they will reach the outer defense systems of Earth in 8 months. The command center became very quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. Earth held 4 billion people. The core worlds of the Coalition held 20 billion more. If these unknown attackers could make entire colonies disappear without a trace, what would they do to the heart of human civilization? "I am calling an emergency meeting of the Coalition Council," Hyan Wu announced. "So Young, prepare a complete briefing. Include everything we know and everything we suspect. Jae-min, I want you there to give your first-hand account." "Yes, sir." Both officers replied. 3 hours later, the emergency meeting began. President Yuna led the Coalition Council. Representatives from all human worlds attended by hologram. The room was filled with worried faces as So Young presented the intelligence report. "The threat is unlike anything we have faced before," she explained. "The attackers appear to have technology that can remove all living things from a planet. Without destroying the infrastructure, they leave no survivors and no evidence of their methods." President Yuna asked the question everyone was thinking. Do we know if these attackers are heading for our core worlds intentionally, or are they just expanding randomly? Captain Jamin stepped forward. "Madam President, based on what I observed, this is not random expansion. The pattern is too organized. They are moving systematically toward our most populated systems. This appears to be a deliberate invasion." The representatives began talking among themselves. Fear and confusion filled the room. Finally, President Yuna called for silence. "Admiral Hyan-woo, what do you recommend?" Han-woo had been thinking about this question since the first colony went silent. "Madam President, we face an unknown enemy with superior technology. Our normal defensive strategies will not work. We need to take the fight to them before they reach our core worlds." "You are suggesting an offensive operation?" "Yes, Madam President. We need to gather every ship we have and strike at them while they are still in the outer territories. If we wait for them to come to us, we will be fighting for the survival of human civilization on our most important worlds." One of the representatives objected. "Admiral, you are talking about sending our entire fleet into unknown space against an enemy we do not understand. What if we lose?" Hyan-woo looked directly at the representative. "Sir, if we do nothing, we will definitely lose. These attackers have destroyed 47 colonies without losing a single ship that we know of. They are not going to stop. Our choice is to fight them now in empty space or fight them later over Earth." President Yuna considered this for several minutes. The room remained silent while she thought. Finally, she spoke. "Admiral Hyan-woo, you are authorized to begin immediate preparations for a full-scale offensive operation. Gather every available ship from the coalition fleet and our allied forces. This threat requires our complete response." "Madam President, with respect, are you sure? We are talking about sending nearly 10,000 ships and millions of personnel into a mission where we do not know if any of them will return." President Yuna stood up. Her voice was firm and clear. "Admiral, 47 colonies trusted. We used to protect them. We failed. 24 billion people in our core worlds are trusting us to protect them now. We will not fail them. Begin the mobilization immediately." As the meeting ended, Hyan-woo felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. He would be leading the largest military operation in human history against an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. But he also knew that President Yuna was right. Sometimes the only choice was to fight, even when victory seemed impossible. The preparations would begin immediately. Soon, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled would head into the unknown to face an enemy that had never been defeated. 10,000 ships would leave human space. Hyan-woo hoped that more than a few would return home. Fleet Admiral Dong Hyan watched from the observation deck as ships arrived at the staging area. The massive space station orbited a gas giant far from any populated world. It was the perfect place to gather the largest military force in human history without causing panic on the core worlds. Every day brought more ships. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and support vessels came from every corner of human space. The numbers were impressive but also frightening. If this fleet was destroyed, humanity would have no defense left. Dr. Subin commanded the carrier Indomitable. Her ship was one of the newest and most powerful in the coalition fleet. She stood on her bridge watching the other ships arrive. Each ship represented hundreds or thousands of people who might never see their homes again. "Captain, incoming message from Fleet Command," her communications officer reported. "Put it through." Fleet Admiral Dong Hyan appeared on the main screen. "Captain Subin, you are assigned to Battle Group 7. Your orders are being transmitted." "Now, understood, sir." "Admiral, do we have any new intelligence about the enemy?" "Our science teams are working around the clock, Captain. Dr. Wu Jin and Science Officer Hana have made some progress analyzing the debris Captain Jamin brought back. In the science section of the station, Dr. Wu Jin examined the strange material under powerful microscopes. The debris pieces were small, but they contained secrets that might save humanity. "Hana, look at this," he said, pointing to his display screen. "The material structure changes depending on what we do to it. When I heat it, it becomes harder. When I cool it, it becomes more flexible. It is like it learns from what happens to it." Science Officer Hana studied the data. She was young but brilliant, one of the best minds in the coalition. "Doctor, if their ships are made from this material, it means they can adapt to our weapons during battle. Every time we shoot them, they get stronger against that type of weapon." "That is exactly what I think too. This explains why we found no evidence of damage to enemy ships at any of the colony sites. They adapt so quickly that our weapons become useless." The implications were terrifying. Humanity relied on superior firepower to win battles. If the enemy could adapt to their weapons in real time, traditional tactics would fail. Meanwhile, Marine Colonel Junasio was training ground forces for planetary assault operations. Even though the colonies had been emptied of people, the military leaders believed they might need to retake some worlds by force. "Listen up, Marines!" Junasio shouted to the assembled troops. "We do not know what we will face down there. The enemy has technology we do not understand. Your training and your unit cohesion are what will keep you alive." Sergeant Dayun led one of the elite squads. She had fought in border conflicts and pirate suppression campaigns, but she had never faced an enemy that could make entire populations disappear without a trace. "Colonel, what do we do if we cannot find the enemy to fight?" she asked. Jun-Esil had been wondering the same thing. "Sergeant, our mission is to secure and hold any planets we retake. If the enemy is invisible or hiding, we adapt our tactics. We set up sensor networks, establish defensive positions, and wait for them to reveal themselves." The training continued day and night. Marines practiced urban combat, ship boarding operations, and planetary assault landings. They trained for every scenario they could imagine, but everyone knew they were preparing for an enemy unlike anything they had faced before. Captain Minho commanded the Dreadnought Squadron. His flagship, Retribution, was the most heavily armed ship in the fleet. He believed that superior firepower was the key to victory, regardless of what the science teams discovered about enemy adaptation. "My ships will break through their defenses," he told the other squadron commanders during a tactical meeting. "We hit them hard and fast before they have time to adapt to our weapons." Captain Subin disagreed. "Captain Minho, the science reports suggest that approach might not work. If they can adapt during battle, overwhelming firepower might just make them stronger." "Captain Subin, with respect, you command a carrier. Your job is to launch fighters and stay back from the main battle. My dreadnoughts will be in the thick of the fighting. I know what works in ship-to-ship combat." The argument reflected a larger debate throughout the fleet. Some officers believed in traditional military doctrine: concentrate firepower and destroy the enemy quickly. Others thought they needed new tactics for this new enemy. Communications Officer the Jin worked in the fleet's main communication center. Her job was to maintain contact between all the ships and coordinate with coalition headquarters. She also had a more personal mission, keeping morale high among the crews. Every day, she broadcast news from home to the fleet. Messages from families, updates about life on the core worlds, and reminders of what they were fighting to protect. The messages helped, but she could see the stress building in everyone around her. The Jin, incoming priority message from Coalition. "Command," her supervisor called out. She opened the encrypted channel. President Nguyen appeared on her screen, speaking directly to the fleet. "To all personnel preparing for Operation Deep Strike, you carry the hopes and prayers of 24 billion people. You are humanity's shield against an unknown threat. Your courage and sacrifice will be remembered forever, regardless of the outcome. Good luck and come home safely." The message was recorded and transmitted to every ship in the fleet. Dajin watched the crew reactions on her monitors. Some people looked determined, others looked scared. All of them understood the importance of their mission. As the weeks passed, the fleet grew larger. Ships from the most distant human colonies arrived with full crews and maximum supplies. Allied species contributed their own vessels. The peaceful Centaurians sent medical ships. The warrior-like Regalians provided escort cruisers. But the most impressive sight was the arrival of the colony ships converted to military use. These massive vessels normally carried thousands of settlers to new worlds. Now they carried armies of marines, tons of supplies, and mobile bases for extended operations in enemy territory. Dr. Wu Jin and Hana worked frantically to understand more about the enemy before the fleet departed. They had made several disturbing discoveries about the debris samples. Hana, I think these materials are not just adaptive, they are alive, Dr. Wu Jin said during one of their late-night research sessions. Look at these cellular structures. They grow and change like biological tissue, but they also have metallic properties. Doctor, are you saying the enemy ships are living creatures? I think the ships might be grown instead of built. And if, that is true, it means we are not fighting against machines controlled by aliens. We might be fighting against the aliens themselves. This discovery changed everything. If the enemy ships were living beings, then destroying them was not just winning a battle, it was killing the enemy directly. But it also meant the enemy had motivations and intelligence that machines would not have. The final preparations took 2 months. When complete, the assembled fleet contained 9,900 ships of various types, over 3 million coalition personnel, prepared to leave known space and venture into the void between galaxies where the enemy had come from. Fleet. Admiral Dong Haiyan addressed the entire fleet on the day of departure. Today we begin the longest journey any human military force has ever undertaken. We do not know what we will find. We do not know if we will return, but we know why we are going. Behind us are 24 billion people who depend on us to stop this threat. We will not let them down. The fleet began its departure in carefully coordinated groups. The largest ships left first, followed by the escort vessels and support ships. Communications Officer Jin maintained contact with coalition headquarters until the fleet reached the edge of human space. As the last ships passed beyond the range of normal communications, the fleet was truly on its own. 3 million people traveling into the unknown to face an enemy that had never been defeated. Captain Jamin stood on his bridge watching the stars change as they entered unexplored space. Beside him, Commander So Young monitored intelligence. Sensors and Tactical Officer Yunji prepared weapon systems. Captain, we are now beyond all mapped star systems, his navigator reported. Very well. Maintain formation and continue on course. From this point forward, we are in enemy territory. The great fleet moved through empty space toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of human civilization. Behind them, families waited and hoped. Ahead of them lay the unknown enemy that had destroyed 47 worlds without losing. A single ship. The journey to contact would take several weeks. Every person in the fleet knew that some of them would not survive what was coming. But they also knew that failure was not an option. Humanity's survival depended on their success. The coalition fleet had been traveling for 3 weeks when the sensors detected the first signs of enemy presence. Long-range scanners picked up massive energy signatures ahead, far larger than anything the fleet had ever encountered. Admiral Han Wu studied the readings from the command ship. The numbers were almost impossible to believe. So Young confirmed these sensor readings. How many enemy contacts are we detecting? Commander So Young double-checked her instruments and ran the scans again. Her face grew pale as she read the results. Admiral, I am reading over 50,000 individual contacts. Each one is roughly the size of our largest battleships. The bridge became very quiet. Everyone understood what those numbers meant. The coalition fleet had 9,900 ships. The enemy had at least 50,000 ships waiting for them. Sir, incoming message from Captain Jamin, the communications officer reported. Put him through. Captain J-Min appeared on the main screen. He was aboard his scout ship at the front of the fleet formation. Admiral, my sensors confirm the enemy numbers. But there is something else. The energy signatures are moving in. Perfect coordination. No individual ship movements, no patrol patterns, they move as one unit. Tactical Officer Yoonji, working alongside J-Min, added her analysis. Admiral, this suggests a hive mind or central control system. If we can identify and destroy the command source, we might be able to disrupt their entire force. Admiral Hainwu considered this information. A hive mind enemy would explain how they had conquered 47 colonies so efficiently. No communication delays, no coordination problems, perfect teamwork between all units. All ships, this is Admiral Hainwu, prepare for engagement. We are facing superior numbers, but we have superior training and tactics. Remember your mission, protect humanity, and stop this threat from reaching our core worlds. Captain Subin received the alert aboard her carrier Indomitable. She immediately began launching fighter squadrons and preparing her ship for battle. Her rival, Captain Minho, did the same aboard his dreadnought Retribution. All squadrons, this is Captain Subin. Launch immediately and form attack formations. We are going into battle against overwhelming odds, but we have trained for this moment. The fighter pilots climbed into their ships knowing they faced impossible odds. Each pilot had family back home depending on them to succeed. Captain Minho prepared his dreadnought squadron for the first assault. All ships, charge main weapons to full power. We will punch through their front lines and create an opening for the rest of the fleet. His weapons officer looked worried. Captain, the enemy numbers are 5 times larger than our entire fleet. Even our most powerful weapons might not be enough. Officer, we fight with what we have. Load all torpedo tubes and prepare for maximum firepower assault. As the two fleets moved closer to each other, the true size of the enemy force became visible. The swarm ships were dark and organic-looking, like living creatures instead of metal constructions. They moved in flowing patterns that looked more like a school of fish than a military formation. Dr. Wu Jin and Science. Officer Hana monitored the enemy ships from the science vessel. The readings they collected confirmed their worst fears about the adaptive technology. Hana, look at these energy patterns. The enemy ships are already changing their configurations as they detect our approach. They are adapting before the battle even starts. Doctor, if they can adapt this quickly, our weapon effectiveness will decrease every minute we fight them. We need to end this battle fast, or we will lose the ability to hurt them at all. Engineer. Kite worked frantically in the engine rooms of the lead ships. He had modified the power systems to provide maximum energy to weapons and shields. Captain J-Min, I have increased power output by 15%, but I cannot maintain this level for more than 30 minutes. Understood, Kite, we will. Make those 30 minutes count. The first contact came when the fleets were still thousands of kilometers apart. The swarm ships fired weapons that the coalition had never seen before. Beams of purple energy that seemed to bend space itself around them. Captain J-Min's ship was hit by one of these beams. The damage was unlike anything they had experienced. Damage report. Captain, the hull is intact, but our power systems are failing. The enemy weapon seems to drain energy directly from our reactors. This was worse than the scientists had predicted. Not only could the enemy adapt to coalition weapons, but their own weapons could disable coalition ships without destroying them. Admiral Hyun-woo watched as the first wave of his fleet engaged the enemy. The results were immediately clear. Human weapons were causing damage, but much less than expected. Meanwhile, enemy weapons were shutting down coalition ships with frightening efficiency. All ships, concentrate fire on individual enemy vessels. Do not spread your attacks across multiple targets. He ordered. Captain Minho led his dreadnought squadron into close combat range. Fire all weapons, maximum firepower. The massive guns of Retribution fired continuously at the nearest swarm ship. The enemy vessel absorbed the damage and began changing its hull structure. Within minutes, the same weapons that had initially hurt it were having no effect at all. Captain, our weapons are no longer penetrating enemy armor, his weapons officer reported. Switch to different weapon types. Use the plasma cannons instead of the rail guns. They switched weapons, and for a few minutes the plasma cannons were effective. But then the enemy ship adapted to those as well. Captain Subin watched the battle from her carrier and realized the terrible truth. All fighters, return to base immediately. Do not engage enemy ships in extended combat. Hit and run tactics only. Her pilots were confused by the order, but they obeyed. Those who had been fighting individual swarm ships discovered that their weapons were becoming less effective every minute. The battle continued for 2 hours, but the outcome was becoming clear. The coalition fleet was losing ships rapidly while causing minimal damage to the enemy. The swarm's adaptive technology was working perfectly. Commander So Young analyzed the battle data and reported to Admiral Hyun Woo. Sir, we have lost over 800 ships. Enemy losses appear to be less than 50 vessels. At this rate, our fleet will be destroyed within 6 hours. The Admiral faced the hardest decision of his military career. Continue fighting and lose everything, or retreat and try to find another way to stop the enemy. All ships, begin tactical withdrawal. Fall back to rally point Beta? Some ship captains questioned the order. Captain Minho especially objected. Admiral, we cannot retreat. If we run now, nothing stands between them and Earth. Captain Minho, if we die here, nothing stands between them and Earth anyway. We need time to develop new tactics and weapons. The retreat began, but the swarm did not let them leave easily. Enemy ships pursued the coalition fleet, continuing to attack with their energy-draining weapons. Captain Jamin's ship was badly damaged and falling behind the main fleet. Engineer Kite was performing miracles to keep the engines running, but they were losing power rapidly. Captain, I can give you emergency speed for 10 minutes, but then the engines will shut down completely, Kite reported. Do it. 10 minutes might be enough to reach the covering fire from our escort ships. As Kite pushed the engines beyond their safety limits, Tactical Officer Onji coordinated with the escort ships to provide protective fire for the damaged vessels. The retreat continued for hours. The coalition fleet lost over 1,500 ships during the withdrawal, but the majority of the fleet escaped. When they finally reached safe distance, Admiral Hyun Woo called for damage reports. The numbers were devastating. Nearly 2,000 ships lost, with minimal enemy casualties. Dr. Woo Jin and Hana analyzed data from the battle and made a disturbing discovery. Admiral, the enemy adaptation is even faster than we predicted. They can modify their defenses within minutes of encountering new weapons. But we also learned something important. They need time to adapt. If we can hit them with many different weapon types simultaneously, we might overwhelm their adaptation ability. Science Officer Hana added more bad news. Admiral, there is another problem. The enemy ships we destroyed released some kind of signal before they died. We think they transmitted their adaptation data to the rest of the swarm. This means the entire enemy fleet now knows how to defend against all our weapons. The implications were terrifying. Not only had they lost the battle, but they had also given the enemy complete knowledge of coalition military technology. Admiral Hyun Woo addressed the surviving fleet commanders. We have learned that conventional tactics will not work against this enemy. They adapt too quickly and learn from every encounter. We need to develop completely new approaches if we want to have any chance of victory. Captain Subin suggested a desperate strategy. Admiral, what if we stop trying to destroy their ships and instead focus on disrupting their coordination? If they use a hive mind, there must be command ships controlling the others. That is our best option, Captain. But first we need to survive long enough to identify their command structure. The battered coalition fleet regrouped in empty space, far from the main swarm force. They had learned valuable lessons about their enemy, but the cost had been enormous. Behind them, the swarm continued its advance toward human space. They had easily defeated the largest military. The coalition fleet had been retreating for 5 days when the swarm caught up to them again. What had started as a strategic offensive had become a desperate fight for survival. Every day brought new losses as the enemy pursued them through. Empty space. Admiral Hyan Wu stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the tactical displays show their deteriorating situation. The fleet now had fewer than 7,000 ships remaining. The swarm had lost less than 200 vessels but seemed to have unlimited replacements. "Admiral, the enemy is closing distance again," Commander So Young reported. "They will be in weapons range within 2 hours. How many ships do we have that are still battle-ready?" "Approximately 4,000, sir. The rest are either damaged or low on ammunition and fuel." Fleet Admiral Dong Hyan joined the discussion via hologram from his command ship. His face showed the strain of constant battle. "Han Wu, we cannot keep running like this. Every engagement costs us hundreds of ships while they barely notice their losses. What do you suggest, Admiral? Stand and fight? We have tried that approach. It does not work against an enemy that adapts to everything we do. I am suggesting we change our tactics completely. Instead of trying to destroy their ships, we focus on learning more about how they operate. We need intelligence more than we need military victories right now." Captain Jae-min had been thinking the same thing. His ship was part of the advanced scout group, and he had been observing enemy behavior patterns during the pursuit. "Admiral, I request permission to attempt a boarding operation on one of their smaller ships." Jae-min transmitted from his battle-damaged vessel. The suggestion shocked everyone on the command channel. "Captain, that is extremely dangerous. We do not know what we will find inside their ships." "Sir, it might be our only chance to understand how they function. If Dr. Wu Jin is right about them being living creatures instead of machines, we need to study them directly." Colonel Jun Seo supported the idea. "Admiral, my Marines have been training for boarding operations. If Captain Jae-min can get us close to an enemy ship, we can attempt to capture one intact." Admiral Hyan Wu considered the proposal. It was risky, but they were already losing the war using conventional tactics. "Very well, Captain Jae-min, select your target carefully. Colonel Jun Seo, prepare your best boarding teams." The plan required precise coordination. Captain Subin would use her fighter squadrons to create a distraction while Jae-min's ship approached an isolated enemy vessel. Meanwhile, Engineer Kite worked on modifying the boarding pods to penetrate unknown alien hull materials. "Kite, can you modify our cutting tools to work on their organic metal composite hulls?" Jae-min asked. "Captain, I have been studying the debris samples Dr. Wu Jin collected. I think I can create a cutting beam that will work, but I cannot guarantee it will continue working if the hull adapts during the cutting process." "How long do you need to cut through?" "Maybe 10 minutes, sir. But if they adapt in 5 minutes, we will be stuck outside their ship with no way in." The boarding operation began during the next enemy attack. Captain Subin launched all her fighter squadrons to attack the main swarm formation, drawing attention away from the smaller ships at the edges of their fleet. "All fighters, concentrate your attacks on the largest enemy vessels. Make them think we are attempting another frontal assault," Subin commanded. Her pilots flew into the battle knowing they were sacrificing themselves to create a diversion. Many of them would not return, but they understood the importance of the mission. While the fighters kept the main enemy force busy, Captain Jae-min approached a lone swarm ship that had separated from the others. Tactical Officer Eun-ji monitored the target vessel for signs of adaptation or defensive responses. "Captain, the target ship does not seem to be reacting to our approach. It is maintaining course and speed as if it does not consider us a threat. That might work in our favor." Kite began cutting operations as soon as we are in range. The modified cutting beam sliced through the alien hull material, but as predicted, the hull began to adapt and harden against the energy. Kite pushed the equipment to maximum power. "Captain, I have maybe 3 more minutes before the hull becomes too hard to cut." Colonel Jun Seo and his Marines prepared to board through the opening. Sergeant Dit Yun led the advance team equipped with recording devices and sample collection equipment. "Marines, remember that we are here to gather intelligence, not to fight." Avoid combat if possible and focus on understanding what we find inside. The boarding pods launched just as Kite's cutting beam broke through the alien hull. The Marines had a narrow window to enter before the opening sealed itself. Inside the swarm ship, the Marines found something that defied all their expectations. The interior was not mechanical corridors and equipment rooms. Instead, they discovered what looked like the inside of a living creature, organic walls that pulsed with flowing liquid, chambers filled with strange gas, and structures that looked more like organs than machinery. "Colonel, this is not a ship," Sergeant Dayan reported over the communication link. "This is a living being. We are inside some kind of spaceborne creature." The discovery explained everything about the swarm's capabilities. These were not aliens, flying ships. These were the aliens themselves, living in space and capable of interstellar travel. Dr. Wu Jin monitored the boarding operation from the science vessel. "Colonel Geneseo, can your team collect tissue samples? We need to understand their biology." "Affirmative, Doctor." "Dayan, collect samples from the wall structures. But be careful not to damage anything vital. We do not want to kill our specimen while we are still inside it." As the Marines explored deeper into the creature, they discovered something even more disturbing. The internal structures were changing and adapting to their presence. Passages that had been open began to narrow. Atmosphere that had been breathable started to change composition. "Colonel, the environment is becoming hostile. I recommend immediate extraction," Yoon reported, but extraction was no longer possible. The opening Kite had cut was healing rapidly, sealing the Marines inside the living ship. "Captain Jamin, we have a problem. The Marines are trapped inside the enemy vessel, and I cannot cut another opening. The hull has adapted to resist our cutting beams completely." On the command ship, Admiral Haiyan Wu watched the situation develop with growing concern. They were about to lose one of their best Marine units, but the intelligence they were gathering might be crucial for humanity's survival. Inside the creature, Colonel Geneseo made a command decision. "All Marines, we are not getting out of here. Our mission now is to gather as much intelligence as possible and transmit it back to the fleet." Sergeant Dayan and her team worked frantically to record everything they observed. The internal structures seemed to serve multiple functions. Propulsion, life support, weapon systems, and communications were all integrated into the creature's biology. "Colonel, I found something important," one of the Marines called out. "There is a chamber here filled with what looks like nerve tissue. It might be the creature's brain or command center." They had discovered the coordination mechanism that allowed the swarm to operate as a hive mind. Each creature had its own intelligence, but they were all connected through some kind of biological communication network. Dr. Wu Jin received the transmitted data and immediately understood its importance. "Admiral, the Marines have discovered that each swarm ship is actually a living creature with its own brain, but they are all connected somehow, sharing information instantly across their entire species." "Doctor, does this give us any tactical advantage?" "Possibly, sir. If we can disrupt their communication network, we might be able to break their coordination, but it would require a completely different type of weapon than anything we have." The situation inside the creature was becoming desperate. The internal atmosphere was now toxic to humans, and the passages were continuing to narrow. Colonel Geneseo knew his team had only minutes left. "All Marines, prepare final data transmission. Include everything we have observed about their internal structure, biology, and command systems." Sergeant Dayan made one last discovery that would prove crucial for the war effort. Deep inside the creature, she found a chamber containing what appeared to be embryonic versions of smaller creatures. "Colonel, they are not just individual organisms. They reproduce and create specialized versions of themselves for different functions. This is not an invasion fleet. This is a migrating species that consumes other life forms to survive." The final transmission from the Marine team provided the coalition with their first real understanding of what they were fighting. The swarm was not a military force trying to conquer territory. They were a nomadic species that traveled between galaxies. consuming all life in their path to sustain themselves. Captain Minho watched from his dreadnought as the creature containing the Marines rejoined the main swarm formation. The sacrifice of the boarding team had provided crucial intelligence, but at a terrible cost. Admiral, incoming transmission from Coalition Command, Communications Officer Dijin reported. President Yuna is requesting a full status report. The report Admiral Haiyan-Wu sent back to human space was grim. The fleet had lost over 3,000 ships and was in continuous retreat. The enemy was a living speck. The coalition fleet was dying. After 2 weeks of continuous retreat and fighting, fewer than 1,000 ships remained from the original 9,900. Every engagement cost them dozens of vessels, while the swarm seemed to grow stronger with each victory. Admiral Haiyan-Wu stood alone in his command center, studying the tactical displays that showed their desperate situation. The enemy had learned to counter every weapon, every tactic, and every strategy the coalition forces attempted. Admiral, incoming priority transmission from Dr. Wu Jin, Commander So Young reported. Her voice was hoarse from days of continuous duty. Put him through. Dr. Wu Jin appeared on the main screen. His laboratory was in chaos, filled with alien tissue samples and experimental equipment. Behind him, Science Officer Hana worked frantically at multiple computer terminals. Admiral, we have made a breakthrough based on the data Colonel Juna CO's team transmitted before they died. We think we can create a weapon that will work against the swarm's biological nature. Explain, Doctor. The creatures operate as a collective intelligence through biological neural networks. Hana has developed a theoretical virus that could disrupt these networks. If successful, it would break their coordination and make them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Admiral Haiyan-Wu felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. How long do you need to develop this weapon? Science Officer Hana answered from her computer station. Admiral, we have the theoretical framework complete, but we need time to synthesize the actual virus and test it. At least 48 hours. Possibly more. Doctor, we do not have 48 hours. The swarm will overrun our position within 12 hours at their current pursuit speed. Fleet Admiral Dong Haiyan joined the conversation via hologram. His command ship was badly damaged, and his crew was exhausted. And we need to buy them the time they need. What if we split the fleet? What do you mean? Most of our ships create a diversion and lead the main swarm force away from the science vessels. A small group escorts Dr. Wu Jin and Hana to a safe location where they can complete their work. Admiral Haiyan-Wu understood the implications immediately. The diversion force would be destroyed, but it might give the scientists enough time to complete the weapon. Captain Subin volunteered immediately. Admiral, my carrier group will lead the diversion. We still have enough fighters to make the swarm think we are attempting another major assault. Captain Jae-min, whose ship was barely functional after the boarding operation, also volunteered. Admiral, my ship cannot run much longer anyway. We might as well make our destruction count for something. Captain Jae-min, your ship carries vital intelligence data. You will escort the science vessels to safety. Engineer Kite had been listening to the discussion while performing emergency repairs. Admiral, I can modify our remaining ships to look like a larger fleet on enemy sensors. It might make the diversion more convincing. The plan was desperate but necessary. Captain Subin would lead 600 ships in a fake assault on the main swarm formation. Meanwhile, Captain Jae-min would escort the science vessels and 200 surviving ships to a hidden location where they could complete the weapon development. All ships, this is Admiral Haiyan-Wu. We are implementing Operation Last Hope. Captain Subin will command the diversion force. Captain Jae-min will command the science escort group. This is likely our final chance to save humanity. The fleet split into 2 groups. Captain Subin prepared her forces for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Her pilots understood they would not survive, but they also understood that their sacrifice might save 24 billion people. All squadrons, this is Captain Subin. Today we show the swarm what human determination looks like. We may not win this battle, but we will make them remember us. The diversion began with Subin's fighters attacking the lead elements of the swarm formation. Engineer Kite's modifications made the 600 ships appear to be over 2,000 vessels on enemy sensors. The swarm took the bait. Believing they faced the entire remaining coalition fleet, they committed their full force to the battle. Thousands of the living ships converged on Subin's position. Meanwhile, Captain Jae-min led the science vessels away from the battle. Dr. Wu Jin and Science Officer Hana worked continuously as their ships fled through empty space, trying to synthesize the neural virus before the diversion force was completely destroyed. The battle was hopeless from the beginning. Captain Subin's ships fought with desperate courage, but they were overwhelmingly outnumbered. One by one, the coalition vessels were destroyed or disabled by the swarm's energy-draining weapons. Communications Officer the Jin maintained contact with the diversion force, broadcasting their final messages to the science group. The messages were full of determination and hope, even as the speakers faced certain death. This is Squadron Leader Park from Fighter Group Alpha. We have taken heavy casualties, but we are still fighting. Tell our families we died protecting. This is Destroyer Hambach. Our weapons are no longer effective, but we will ram the nearest enemy ship. Long live humanity! Captain Subin's carrier Indomitable was one of the last ships to fall. As enemy creatures surrounded her vessel, she transmitted her final message. This is Captain Subin to all surviving coalition forces. We have bought you approximately 6 hours. Use them well. The future of our species depends on what happens next. The diversion force was completely destroyed, but their sacrifice had worked. The main swarm formation was delayed while they consumed the wreckage and absorbed the new tactical information. In the hidden location, Dr. Wu Jin and Hana worked frantically to complete the neural virus. They had studied the tissue samples, analyzed the neural network data, and developed what they hoped would be an effective biological weapon. The synthesis is almost complete, but we need to test it before we can deploy it against the main swarm force. Doctor, we have isolated swarm tissue samples. We can test the virus in the laboratory, but we cannot be certain it will work on living creatures until we try it in actual combat. Captain Jae-min monitored the progress while Tactical Officer Yoonji prepared the remaining ships for what might be their final battle. Engineer Kite worked on delivery systems for the theoretical weapon. Captain, if this virus works, how do we get it close enough to the swarm to be effective? Yoonji asked. Kite, can you modify our missiles to carry a biological payload instead of explosive warheads? Yes, Captain. But the missiles will need to penetrate the creatures' hulls to deliver the virus directly into their biological systems. Our conventional missiles cannot do that because the hulls have adapted to resist them. This was another problem they had not anticipated. Even if the virus worked, they needed a way to deliver it through the adaptive hull material. Dr. Wu Jin provided the solution. Captain, the virus does not need to penetrate the hull. If we can disperse it in space around the creatures, it will be absorbed through their normal biological processes. These creatures breathe and feed through their hull surfaces. Science Officer Hana completed the final virus synthesis and ran immediate tests on the tissue samples. The results exceeded their hopes. The virus disrupted the neural connections almost instantly. Doctor, the laboratory tests show complete disruption of neural activity within 30 seconds of exposure. If this works on living creatures, their hive mind should collapse immediately. But they still faced the problem of how to deploy the weapon effectively. The swarm was actively hunting for the remaining coalition forces, and they had very few ships left. Captain Minho's dreadnought squadron had been part of the diversion force, but his ship Retribution had survived the battle with severe damage. He limped toward the science group's position with 20 other damaged vessels. Captain Jae-min, this is Captain Minho. My ship is barely operational, but my weapon systems still function. If you have developed a weapon that can hurt these creatures, we are ready to test it. The final plan was simple and desperate. The surviving coalition ships would approach the main swarm formation and deploy the neural virus using modified missiles and dispersal charges. If the weapon worked, the creature's coordination would collapse and they could be destroyed with conventional weapons. If it failed, humanity's last military force would be eliminated. All ships, this is Captain J-Min. We are implementing the final phase of Operation Last Hope. Dr. Wu Jin's neural virus is our only chance of victory. We will approach the enemy and deploy the weapon at close range. The 43 surviving coalition ships approach the massive swarm formation. 50,000 living creatures waited for them, confident in their invincibility after destroying thousands of human vessels. Engineer Kite had loaded the neural virus into every available missile and torpedo. Captain, we have enough virus payload for one massive attack. If this does not work, we will not get a second chance. Understood, Kite. All ships prepare to launch on my command. Target the center of their formation where their command creatures are most likely to be located. As they closed to attack range, Admiral Hyun Woo transmitted what he believed would be humanity's final message. To all surviving personnel, you carry the hopes of our entire species. Whatever happens next, you have already proven that humanity will not surrender without a fight. Fire when ready. The last missiles of the human fleet launch. The neural virus missiles streaked toward the swarm formation, carrying humanity's last hope. Captain J-Min watched from his damaged bridge as the 43 remaining coalition ships faced 50,000 alien creatures in what would determine the fate of human civilization. Impact in 30 seconds, Tactical Officer Yunji reported. All missiles are on target for the center of their formation. Dr. Wu Jin monitored the virus deployment from his laboratory. Captain, if the weapon works, we should see disruption of their coordination within 1 minute of impact. If we see no change after 2 minutes, the weapon has failed. The missiles reached the swarm formation and exploded, releasing clouds of the neural virus into space around the alien creatures. For several tense seconds, nothing seemed to happen. The swarm continued their advance with perfect coordination. Then something changed. Science. Officer Hana was the first to notice it. Doctor, look at the sensor readings. The creature's energy signatures are becoming irregular. The perfectly coordinated movement of the swarm began to break down. Individual creatures started moving in different directions instead of maintaining their formation. Some stopped completely, while others began spinning or moving in circles. It is working, Dr. Wu Jin announced. The virus is disrupting their neural networks. Their hive mind is collapsing. Admiral Hyun Woo could hardly believe what he was seeing on the tactical displays. The massive enemy formation was dissolving into chaos as thousands of creatures lost their coordination. All ships, the weapon is effective. Engage with conventional weapons while they are disrupted. Captain Minho's damaged dreadnought Retribution fired its remaining weapons at the confused creatures. For the first time in the entire war, coalition weapons were causing significant damage to the swarm. Captain J-Min, my weapons are penetrating their hulls. They have lost their ability to adapt. Engineer Kite explained what was happening. Captain, the neural virus is disrupting more than just their coordination. It is affecting all their biological functions, including their adaptation ability. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The neural virus was spreading rapidly through space, and the coalition ships were running low on fuel and ammunition. Worse, some of the creatures were beginning to recover from the initial virus exposure. Admiral, we have a problem, Science Officer Hana reported. Some of the creatures are developing resistance to the virus. Their biological systems are starting to adapt even to our biological weapon. The window of opportunity was closing quickly. The coalition had perhaps an hour before the surviving creatures regained their coordination and adaptive abilities. Captain J-Min made a desperate decision. All ships, concentrate all remaining firepower on the largest creatures first. We need to destroy as many as possible before they recover. The battle that followed was unlike any previous engagement. For the first time, human weapons were destroying swarm creatures faster than the aliens could adapt. But the coalition ships were also running out of ammunition and fuel. Communications. Officer Dijin coordinated between the surviving ships, managing their limited resources to maximize damage to the enemy. Destroyer Sol reports ammunition at 10%. Cruiser Bizon requests fuel transfer to continue operations. Engineer Kite performed miracles, transferring fuel and ammunition between ships while they continued fighting. Captain, I can keep us operational for maybe 2 more hours, but then we will be completely out of resources. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, over half of the swarm creatures had been destroyed. But the coalition fleet had been reduced to just 17 ships, most of them severely damaged. Admiral Hyun Woo surveyed the aftermath from his command center. The sensor displays showed the wreckage of both fleets scattered across thousands of kilometers of space. So Young status report on surviving enemy forces. Commander So Young, exhausted from days of continuous duty, analyzed the sensor data. Admiral, we estimate approximately 20,000 enemy creatures survived the battle. They appear to be regrouping at the edge of the battle zone. Are they still affected by the virus? Partially, sir. Their coordination is still disrupted, but they are recovering. Dr. Wu Jin estimates they will regain full hive mind function within 12 hours. The victory was incomplete. They had severely damaged the swarm, but 20,000 creatures were still enough to destroy human civilization. If they reach the core worlds. Dr. Wu Jin joined the discussion via hologram. His laboratory was destroyed, and he was working from emergency equipment. Admiral, we used all our virus payload in the initial attack. We cannot produce more without returning to a fully equipped laboratory. Doctor, how long would it take to produce more of the weapon? Several weeks, sir. We would need to synthesize new batches and develop better delivery systems. Fleet Admiral Dong Hyen's ship had been destroyed in the battle, but he had been rescued by one of the surviving vessels. Hyun-woo, we cannot fight another major engagement. Our ships are too damaged and our crews are exhausted. The 17 surviving ships were indeed in terrible condition. Most had lost their primary weapons and all were running on emergency power. Several were so damaged they could barely maintain life support. Captain Jamin's ship was among the most severely damaged. Engineer Kite had kept it operational through expert repairs and jury-rigged solutions, but the vessel would not survive another battle. Admiral, recommend we begin immediate withdrawal to coalition space, Jamin suggested. We can warn our defensive forces about the remaining swarm creatures and help prepare for their arrival. It was a bitter decision. They had achieved a partial victory, but they were abandoning the battlefield to an enemy that could still destroy humanity. Tactical Officer Yunji had been analyzing the enemy survivors. Admiral, the remaining creatures are not pursuing us. They appear to be consuming the wreckage from the battle, including the bodies of their own dead. This observation provided crucial intelligence. The swarm creatures needed to feed on organic matter to maintain their strength. The massive battle had provided them with plenty of food, but it also meant they would be occupied for days or weeks processing the biological material. So young, how long before the surviving creatures could reach coalition space? Based on their current behavior and the time needed to process the battlefield wreckage, I estimate 6 to 8 weeks before they resume their advance toward human space. This gave humanity time to prepare, but it was still a race against time. Admiral Han Wu made the hardest decision of his career. All ships begin withdrawal to coalition space. We will use the time we have gained to prepare our final defenses. The 17 ships began their long journey home, carrying the survivors of the largest military disaster in human history. Behind them, 20,000 alien creatures fed on the remains of both fleets, growing stronger for the final assault on human civilization. Communications Officer Dejin sent regular reports back to Coalition Command, updating them on the fleet's status and the threat that was still approaching. Coalition Command, this is the surviving fleet. We have achieved a partial victory against the swarm, reducing their numbers by more than half. However, significant enemy forces remain and will likely reach our defensive perimeter within 2 months. The response from President Yuna was immediate. Admiral Hyun Woo, you and your crews have performed beyond all expectations. Use the time you have gained to help us prepare our final defenses. Humanity will not surrender. The journey home took 3 weeks. During that time, Dr. Woo Jin and Science Officer Han-Ah worked to develop improved versions of the neural virus using the limited equipment available on the surviving ships. Engineer Kite performed constant repairs to keep the damaged vessels operational. Several ships had to be abandoned along the way when their damage became too severe to continue. When they finally reached Coalition space, only 17 ships remained from the original fleet of 9,900. Less than 5,000 people survived. From the millions who had departed months earlier, but they brought with them something more valuable than military victory. They brought knowledge of how to fight the swarm, and hope that humanity could survive. The returning heroes were greeted as saviors, but they knew the war was far from over. 20,000 alien creatures were still coming, and the final battle for human survival would be fought over Earth itself. Admiral Hyun Woo looked at his exhausted crew and the damaged ships around him. They had paid a terrible price, but they had given humanity a chance. Now it was up to others to make that chance count. The incursion had begun with 9,900 ships. Only 17 had made it back. But those 17 carried the key to humanity's survival, and that would have to be enough. The 17 surviving ships limped into Earth's orbital defense zone 6 weeks after the Great Battle. Admiral Hyun Woo stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, looking at the massive defensive preparations that had been constructed during their absence. Thousands of new ships filled the space around Earth and the core worlds. Orbital weapons platforms, minefields, and defensive stations created layers of protection that had never existed before. But everyone knew it might not be enough against the 20,000 swarm creatures that were still approaching. Admiral, incoming transmission from Coalition Command, Communications Officer Daejin reported. She had been working continuously to coordinate between the returning fleet and the home defenses. President Yuna appeared on the main screen, flanked by military commanders and scientists. Admiral Hyun Woo, welcome home. Your reports have allowed us to prepare for the final battle. What is the status of Dr. Woo Jin's neural virus weapon? Dr. Woo Jin joined the conversation from his emergency laboratory aboard one of the damaged ships. Madam President, we have refined the weapon based on what we learned in the battle. The new version should be more effective and longer lasting against the swarm creatures. Doctor, how much of this weapon can we produce before the enemy arrives? Science. Officer Hana answered from her station. Madam President, with the full resources of our industrial worlds, we estimate we can produce enough neural virus to affect approximately 10,000 creatures. But we need at least 4 more weeks to complete production. The numbers were sobering. They could produce enough weapon to affect half the remaining swarm, but intelligence reports suggested the creatures would arrive within 2 weeks. Captain Jaemin, whose ship was barely held together by Engineer Kite's repairs, offered a solution. Madam President, what if we take the fight to them again? A small force could carry the completed virus weapons to the enemy and deploy them before they reach our defensive perimeter. The suggestion was met with immediate objections from the other commanders. Captain, we cannot risk losing our remaining experienced personnel in another offensive operation. Fleet Admiral Park argued, but Admiral Hyun Woo understood what Jae-min was proposing. The captain is correct. If we wait for them to reach our defenses, we will be fighting over populated worlds. Better to make our final stand in empty space. President Yuna considered the proposal carefully. Admiral, you are suggesting we send our most experienced survivors on what amounts to a suicide mission. Madam President, the alternative is to fight the final battle in Earth's orbital space with 24 billion civilians below us. If we fail there, human civilization ends completely. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the desperate logic became clear. A small force of volunteers would carry the neural virus weapons to intercept the swarm before they reached Coalition space. Captain Jae-min volunteered immediately, despite his ship's condition. Admiral, my crew has already faced the enemy multiple times. We know their capabilities better than anyone. Engineer Kite supported the decision. Captain, I can modify our remaining ships to carry maximum virus payload. We won't need weapons or heavy armor for this mission, just delivery systems and speed. Tactical Officer Yunji had been studying the latest intelligence reports about the approaching swarm. Captain, the enemy creatures have changed their formation since feeding on the battlefield wreckage. They are traveling in a much tighter group, which could work to our advantage if we can get the virus into the center of their formation. The volunteer force was assembled within days. 12 of the 17 surviving ships would carry the neural virus weapons to intercept the swarm. The other 5 ships, too damaged to make the journey, would remain to help defend the core worlds. Dr. Wu Jin worked frantically to complete as much neural virus as possible before the mission departed. Admiral, I have enough weapon to significantly disrupt their coordination, but I cannot guarantee it will affect all 20,000 creatures. Doctor, we are not expecting to destroy them all. We just need to break their formation and reduce their numbers before they reach our main defenses. Science Officer Hana had discovered something important during her continued research. Admiral, the creatures that survived our first virus attack have developed some resistance, but they also seem to be more vulnerable to certain types of biological disruption. I have modified the new virus to exploit these weaknesses. The final preparations took place in the shadow of approaching doom. Long-range sensors confirmed the swarm was moving faster than expected. Having absorbed energy and nutrients from the battlefield wreckage, Captain Minho's replacement dreadnought joined the volunteer force. His original ship Retribution had been destroyed, but he commanded a new vessel hastily prepared for the mission. Admiral, my ship is loaded with virus missiles and ready for departure. Communications Officer Dejin would remain with the home fleet, but she helped prepare long-range communication systems for the volunteer force. Captain Jaemin, we will maintain contact as long as possible, but once you engage the enemy, you will be on your own. The 12 ships departed Earth orbit in a ceremony attended by millions of people. Everyone understood this was likely humanity's final military operation. If these ships failed, there would be no other chances. Admiral Hyun Woo remained with the main defensive fleet, but his thoughts followed the volunteer force as they traveled toward their rendezvous with destiny. The journey to intercept the swarm took 10 days. During that time, Engineer Kite made final modifications to the virus delivery systems, while Dr. Wu Jin continued refining the biological weapon using portable laboratory equipment. Captain Jaemin commanded the mission from his patched-together flagship. Despite all of Kite's repairs, the ship was held together more by determination than engineering. All ships maintain formation and prepare for final weapons check. When they reached the intercept point, the swarm was already visible. On long-range sensors, 20,000 creatures traveling in a tight formation, their organic hulls gleaming with absorbed energy from their recent feeding. Captain, enemy formation is exactly as predicted, Tactical Officer Yunji reported. They are traveling in a sphere pattern with the largest creatures at the center. This was exactly what they had hoped for. The tightest formation would allow the neural virus to spread most effectively through the enemy. Ranks. Dr. Wu Jin made final preparations to the virus weapons. Captain, I have loaded every available delivery system. We have one chance to deploy maximum payload before they adapt to our weapon. The attack began at maximum range. All 12 ships fired simultaneously, launching hundreds of virus-loaded missiles at the center of the swarm formation. The creatures detected the incoming attack and began evasive maneuvers, but their tight formation worked against them. The virus missiles exploded throughout their ranks, releasing clouds of the biological weapon. Impact successful, Yunji reported. Virus deployment at 90% efficiency across the target area. For several tense minutes, the swarm continued. Their advance unchanged, then the effects began to show. Captain, enemy formation is breaking apart. Engineer Kite announced from his sensor station. Individual creatures are losing coordination. The neural virus was working even better than expected. Not only were the creatures losing their hive mind connection, but many were becoming completely incapacitated as the improved virus attacked their biological systems more aggressively, but the victory came at a cost they had not anticipated. The virus clouds were spreading beyond the enemy formation, and several coalition ships were entering the contaminated space. "Captain, we have a problem," Dr. Wu Jin announced. "The virus is more aggressive than I designed. It is affecting any biological matter it encounters, including human crews." Captain Jamin felt the effects beginning to affect his own crew. The virus was designed to disrupt alien neural networks, but it was also having unexpected effects on human biology. "All ships maintain maximum distance from the virus clouds. Do not enter contaminated space." But it was too late for several ships. 3 vessels had flown too close to the deployment zone and were now trapped in the spreading biological weapon. "This is Captain Li aboard destroyer Guangzhou. My crew is experiencing severe biological effects from virus exposure. We cannot maintain ship operations." Similar reports came from 2 other ships. The crews were becoming incapacitated as the virus affected their nervous systems. Captain Jamin faced an impossible decision. The virus was successfully destroying the swarm, but it was also killing his own people. "All ships begin immediate withdrawal from the combat zone." "Captain, we cannot leave the contaminated ships behind," Tactical Officer Yunji objected. "We have no choice. The virus will kill anyone who enters those zones." Engineer Kite had been monitoring the virus effects on both human and alien biology. "Captain, the good news is that the virus breaks down rapidly in space. The contaminated zones will be safe within 6 hours." But the crews of the trapped ships did not have 6 hours. Captain Jamin listened to their final transmissions as the biological weapon that was saving humanity also claimed the lives of its creators. "This is Captain Lee. Tell our families we completed the mission. The swarm is broken. Long live humanity." When the journey home took longer than expected. The 9 surviving ships from the final mission were badly damaged, and several crew members were still recovering from exposure to their own biological weapon. Engineer Kite worked miracles to keep the vessels operational during the 2-week return flight. Captain Jamin stood on his bridge, watching the familiar stars of human space grow brighter ahead. His ship had been held together by emergency repairs and determination for so long that he wondered if it would survive the final approach to Earth. "Captain, incoming transmission from Coalition Command," Communications Officer Dejin reported from the home fleet. "Admiral Haiyan-Wu wants to personally welcome the returning heroes." "Put him through." Admiral Haiyan-Wu appeared on the screen, and for the first time in months, he was smiling. "Captain Jamin, the entire coalition is celebrating your victory. The remaining swarm creatures have been easily destroyed by our defensive fleets. The threat to humanity is over." The news was almost too good to believe. After losing over 9,800 ships and millions of lives, the war was finally won. Dr. Wu Jin had spent the return journey analyzing samples from the final battle. "Captain, the neural virus exceeded all our expectations. Not only did it break the swarm's coordination, but it seems to have permanently damaged their ability to adapt to new threats." Science Officer Hana added her own analysis. "The surviving creatures were destroyed by conventional weapons without any difficulty. Their adaptive capabilities appear to be completely gone. As the ships approached Earth orbit, they could see the massive celebration taking place on the planet below. Cities were lit up with victory celebrations, and millions of people were gathered to welcome the returning heroes." Tactical Officer Yunji monitored the approach carefully. "Captain, we are being escorted by the honor guard. They are treating you just like returning conquerors." But Captain Jamin felt no sense of conquest. Too many good people had died to achieve this victory. Colonel Jun Seo and his Marines, Captain Subin and her carrier crew, Captain Minho and his dreadnought squadron, and thousands of others who would never see home again. "All ships maintain formation for the final approach. We represent not just ourselves, but everyone who did not make it back. The landing ceremonies were beyond anything in human history. President Yuna personally greeted each returning crew member, and the entire Coalition Council was present to honor the survivors. Admiral Hyun Woo, Captain Jae-min, and all personnel of the Deep Strike Fleet, you have saved human civilization itself, President Yuna announced to the billions watching the ceremony. Your sacrifice and courage will be remembered for as long as humanity exists. In the weeks that followed, the true scope of what had been accomplished became clear. Not only had humanity survived the swarm invasion, but they had developed weapons and tactics that would protect them from similar threats in the future. Dr. Wu Jin and Science Officer Hana were awarded the Coalition's highest scientific honors for developing the neurovirus weapon. But both of them insisted that the real heroes were the military personnel who had carried the weapon into battle. Engineer Kite became legendary among ship designers for his ability to keep damaged vessels operational under impossible conditions. His modifications and repair techniques were studied and adopted throughout the Coalition fleet. Admiral Hyun Woo was promoted to Supreme Commander of Coalition forces, responsible for rebuilding humanity's military capabilities and preparing for future threats, but the greatest honor went to those who had not returned. Memorial services were held on every human world for the crews of the lost ships. Their names were inscribed on monuments that would stand forever as reminders of the price of survival. Communications Officer the Jin took on a special mission, broadcasting the complete story of the incursion to every human settlement. She wanted to ensure that future generations would understand what had been sacrificed to preserve their freedom. This is the story of the greatest military operation in human history, she began her broadcast. It began with 9,900 ships and nearly 4 million personnel. Only 17 ships and fewer than 5,000 people returned. But their sacrifice saved 24 billion lives and preserved human civilization. Captain Jae-min, now promoted to Admiral, established training programs based on the hard-won lessons of the war. New tactics, new weapons, and new strategies were developed to ensure humanity would never again be caught unprepared by an unknown threat. The survivors of the incursion became teachers and advisors, passing on their knowledge to the next generation of military personnel. They spoke at academies, wrote training manuals, and shared their experiences with anyone who would listen. Sergeant Da-yoon, one of the few Marines to survive the war, established special forces training programs that emphasized adaptability and creativity in the face of unknown enemies. Her programs became the standard for elite military units throughout Coalition space. But perhaps the most important legacy was the unity that the war had created among humanity. The threat of extinction had brought together all human worlds and allied species in a way that peace had never achieved. President Yuna addressed the Coalition Council on the first anniversary of the victory. The incursion cost us dearly, but it also showed us what we can accomplish when we stand together. We must never forget the lessons learned in blood and sacrifice. The swarm had been completely eliminated. Search and rescue missions found no trace of surviving creatures anywhere in the galaxy. Humanity had achieved total victory, but the cost would be remembered forever. New colonies were established in the regions previously occupied by the swarm. These worlds were named after the ships and personnel lost in the war: New Retribution, Indomitable Station, Junesio Colony, and dozens of others. Dr. Wu Jin continued his research, working to develop defenses against other potential biological threats. The neural virus had proven that humanity could adapt their weapons to fight any enemy, no matter how advanced or alien. Science Officer Hana became the director of the new Xenobiology Institute, dedicated to studying alien life forms and developing countermeasures against future threats. Her work ensured that humanity would never again face an unknown enemy without understanding their capabilities. Engineer Kite designed the new generation of Coalition warships, incorporating all the lessons learned during the incursion. These ships were more adaptable, more survivable, and more effective than anything humanity had built before, but the most lasting impact of the war was on the human spirit itself. The species that had once been divided by politics and territory had united in the face of extinction. They had proven that human determination and ingenuity could overcome any challenge. Admiral Hyun Woo, now an old man, often visited the memorial walls where the names of the lost were inscribed. He would read the names aloud, remembering faces and voices of people who had trusted him to lead them into the unknown. "We asked them to follow us into certain death," he once told a group of young officers. "And they did it without hesitation because they understood that sometimes the only choice is between fighting and surrender. They chose to fight, and because of that choice, all of you are here today." The final report on the incursion was classified at the highest levels, but its conclusions were shared with every military academy in human space. The report ended with a simple statement that became the motto of the Coalition Defense Forces. When faced with impossible odds, humanity does not calculate the chances of victory. We fight because fighting is what makes us human, and we continue fighting until we win or until there is no one left to fight. The incursion began with 9,900 ships. Only 17 made it back, but those 17 carried the future of our species, and that was enough. Years passed and the veterans of the incursion grew old, but their legacy lived on in the ships they had designed, the tactics they had developed, and the spirit of determination they had passed on to future generations. Communications Officer Dejin continued broadcasting the story until her death, ensuring that no human child would grow up without knowing the price of their freedom. Her final broadcast ended with words that became part of human culture. Remember them not for how they died, but for why they chose to fight. They faced the darkness between the stars and refused to let it consume the light of human civilization. Their names are written in starlight, and their courage burns eternal in the hearts of all who came after. The incursion was over, but its legacy would endure as long as humanity reached for the stars. The species that had once nearly been destroyed by an alien threat had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before, and in the depths of space, where the great battle had been fought, monuments drifted among the asteroids, the wreckage of ships that had carried humanity's greatest heroes into legend. They served as eternal reminders that sometimes the greatest victories require the greatest sacrifices. The war was won. Humanity had survived, and the 17 ships that returned home had brought back something more valuable than victory. They had brought back hope for the future.